The crowd erupted in chaos the moment Donald Trump stormed off the stage. The bright lights flickered as whispers turned into shouts. Ibrahim Traoré stood alone, his eyes scanning the room, calm but burning with resolve. Every step he took echoed like a heartbeat in the silence that followed Trump's departure. People stared, unsure if he would follow, leave, or confront. But then, Ibrahim raised his hand and spoke. His voice was steady, almost soft, yet it carried through the hall like a storm. "Leaving does not mean winning," he said. The tension in the air was so thick you could almost touch it. Some faces in the crowd shifted, uncertainty clouding their eyes. But slowly, something began to change. Fear turned to curiosity. Shock softened into attention. Ibrahim didn't raise his voice or shout. He just looked at them, direct, human, real, and spoke truths that were hard to ignore. A faint metallic smell hung in the air, from the stage equipment, or maybe the nervous sweat of those watching. Every word Ibrahim spoke seemed to make Trump's absence feel less like a victory and more like a challenge the crowd needed to witness. Ibrahim stepped closer to the microphone. The murmurs faded as if the crowd itself had held its breath. His hands weren't clenched in anger. They rested lightly at his sides. Yet every gesture seemed charged with purpose. He told stories of ordinary people struggling under unseen pressures. Each story painted a vivid picture. A mother worried about her child's future, a young man doubting his path, a teacher trying to keep hope alive. Every anecdote landed like a pebble thrown into still water, sending ripples across the audience. Then abruptly, Ibrahim paused. His eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability showing for the first time. "Even I have fears," he admitted quietly. The confession was like a shockwave. The crowd, used to leaders hiding their doubts, leaned in closer. They didn't just hear him, they felt him. From the back, a cough rang sharp and sudden, breaking the tension for a fraction of a second. But it didn't shake Ibrahim. Instead, he smiled faintly, human and real, and continued. Each word seemed to pull the audience closer, not with promises or threats, but with honesty and courage. By the time he finished that segment, something remarkable had happened. The crowd was no longer just watching, they were with him. Trump's absence hung over the stage like a shadow, but Ibrahim refused to acknowledge it. Instead, he turned the focus toward the audience, asking questions that were simple but impossible to ignore. What scares you? What drives you? What will you fight for? The first few hesitated, but soon voices began to rise, answering. Hesitation gave way to energy, confusion to connection. The room vibrated with a newfound tension, but this one felt different, hopeful, alive, charged. Then came the twist. A sudden shout from the side interrupted the rhythm, someone accusing Ibrahim of daring to criticize a former president. Gasps swept through the room. Even Ibrahim's calm was tested, but instead of retreating, he stepped forward, voice strong, eyes unwavering. Criticism is not disrespect, it is accountability, and accountability is the first step toward truth. The crowd shifted, murmurs turning into applause, some hesitant, some fierce. You could see the realization in their eyes. He was not just responding, he was leading them. The energy in the room transformed. The fear that had gripped them only minutes ago melted, replaced by admiration, shock, and excitement. Outside, the lights of the city glared through the windows, sharp and intrusive. But inside, the stage had become a different world. One where Ibrahim held the power to change minds, and maybe hearts. The crowd's energy was electric, yet uneven, like lightning trapped inside a storm cloud. Ibrahim paused, letting silence stretch. Every eye was fixed on him, every ear straining for what he would say next. A reporter shouted from the edge of the stage, trying to bait him. "Are you really ready to face the consequences of speaking like this?" The words echoed, sharp and challenging. Some in the audience flinched. Fear rippled briefly, but Ibrahim's calm gaze didn't waver. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Consequences are real," he admitted, "but courage is louder." The confession was unexpected. He wasn't invincible. The crowd's tension shifted again, this time into empathy. They were beginning to see him not just as a leader, but as a human who understood risk, doubt, and responsibility. Then suddenly, the lights flickered. A brief power surge plunged the stage into near darkness. Gasps and nervous laughter followed. Ibrahim didn't panic. Instead, he raised his hand, and the murmurs faded. "Even in darkness, truth shines," he said softly. The small sensory moment, the flicker, the smell of overheated wires, made the crowd hold their breath as if time itself had paused. By the end of his segment, whispers of admiration had replaced shouts of confusion. Something unseen had shifted. The audience was quietly starting to take his side. As the lights returned fully, Ibrahim's voice grew firmer. He began weaving stories of real struggles, farmers losing land, teachers fighting despair, children dreaming against odds. Each story painted a scene so vivid you could almost see the sweat, hear the cries, feel the tears. Then came an unexpected emotional twist. A young woman in the front row began to weep, not loudly, just quietly, her shoulders shaking. Ibrahim paused, noticing her. Without hesitation, he walked toward her. "Your pain is valid," he said gently, kneeling. The crowd held its breath. No one expected a leader to kneel, to make connection this raw. The murmurs grew into soft applause, then louder, then a roar. The power of empathy had flipped the room. Fear of Trump's shadow, of confrontation, had melted. Now it was admiration, fierce and unshakable. But just as triumph seemed near, a door at the back slammed open. A loud, threatening figure appeared. Security or trouble? No one could tell. The crowd froze. Even Ibrahim's calm didn't falter, but a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. The figure advanced, tension cutting through the room like a knife. Heartbeats sped. Every step echoed against the walls. The crowd instinctively leaned back, fear and suspense rising. Ibrahim didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a hand, not in threat, but as a signal to stop. His voice rang out clearly. "This stage is for truth, not intimidation." The figure hesitated. The smell of sweat and fear mingled in the air, almost tangible. Then unexpectedly, the figure turned, not aggressive but uncertain. A quiet voice muttered, almost inaudible, "I just wanted to see if he could really lead." The crowd's shock was immediate. An aggressor had become a witness. Ibrahim smiled softly. "Leadership is not power over others," he said. "It is the courage to stand, even when fear is loudest." The crowd erupted, but this time with deep, unanimous conviction. They weren't cheering for spectacle. They were cheering for honesty, strength, and humanity. As applause filled the room, the city's night air pressed against the windows. And somewhere in the shadows, the question lingered. Would Trump return, or had the tide already turned? The suspense was unbearable, the answer still unknown. The crowd's cheers had barely settled when a sudden hush fell. A phone camera flashed from the balcony, and a live stream began. Millions were watching from homes around the world. Ibrahim felt the weight of every pair of eyes, every heartbeat synced with his own. He leaned into the microphone and asked, "What does courage look like to you?" The question was simple, but in that room it felt like a challenge. A father in the crowd answered quietly, "It's standing up when everyone expects you to sit down." Ibrahim nodded, his eyes sweeping across the audience. Then, mid-story, a sharp scent of burnt popcorn drifted from the concession stand, an odd, almost comical distraction. But it broke the tension just enough to make the audience chuckle, a shared human moment. Suddenly, a staff member whispered urgently in his ear. Trump's team had released a provocative video clip online, framing Ibrahim as disrespectful. Gasps rippled through the room. The moment could have shattered confidence, yet Ibrahim smiled calmly. "I see fear everywhere," he said. But truth doesn't wait for approval. The unexpected emotional shift stunned everyone. He wasn't angry. He was resolute, human, and unexpectedly brave. The room leaned in as he prepared to confront this new challenge head-on. The video clip played on a large screen behind him. Trump's voice boomed, mocking and accusatory. Many in the audience winced. The tension was tangible, almost painful, like holding your breath too long. Ibrahim didn't step back. He walked slowly toward the screen, eyes locked on the projection. "Look closer," he said. "Don't just watch. Understand." His voice carried a strange calmness, a magnetic pull. Then, unexpectedly, he paused and allowed a flicker of vulnerability to show. "Yes, I've been mocked before," he admitted quietly. "Yes, it stings." The confession rippled through the audience. The shock was sharp, but it drew them closer, emotionally tethering them to him. He clicked a button, revealing evidence that countered the claims, simple, undeniable facts. The room erupted, not in anger, but in awe. The power dynamic had shifted. Trump's attack had been turned into a lesson on courage, truth, and accountability. By the end, the audience wasn't just cheering. They were emotionally invested. Their loyalty had shifted subtly, but irreversibly. And somewhere in the silence between applause, a question hung in the air. Would Trump escalate, or had Ibrahim already turned the tide completely? The night air pressed against the windows again, carrying the scent of rain and city life. Ibrahim felt the audience's eyes like a physical weight, expecting more. He smiled, aware of the suspense he had created. He began a story about a young boy in Burkina Faso who refused to accept corruption as inevitable. Each word painted vivid images of resilience, courage, and hope. The crowd was silent, captivated, hearts aching and swelling simultaneously. Then came the unexpected twist. A loud shout erupted from the back. Someone had recognized a former Trump supporter in the crowd, now visibly torn between old loyalty and newfound admiration. Tension spiked. Would the crowd turn against Ibrahim or embrace him fully? Ibrahim didn't hesitate. He walked calmly toward the supporter, speaking directly, his voice soft but commanding. "You don't need to follow fear. You can follow truth." The man's expression softened, and slowly, hesitance gave way to nodding approval. The emotional punch hit the audience like a wave. They weren't just watching a debate. They were witnessing transformation. But outside, the storm clouds over the city hinted at bigger battles to come. The question lingered. Had Ibrahim just won hearts, or was the real test still ahead? The lights dimmed slightly as Ibrahim stepped back, letting the audience absorb the last moment. He could feel the city's hum outside, a constant reminder that the world was watching and judging. The silence inside was heavier than any shout. Suddenly a phone rang, loud and shrill, breaking the fragile tension. Heads turned, some annoyed, some anxious. Ibrahim didn't flinch. He smiled faintly, acknowledging the disruption. "Even interruptions carry lessons," he said. "Focus is not the absence of noise, but the presence of clarity." The crowd murmured in appreciation, caught off guard by the calm wisdom in such a simple statement. Then he began a story of a small village facing a crisis. Their water supply contaminated, children falling ill. The imagery was vivid. The smell of wet earth, the taste of dust, the fear in parents' eyes. Mid-story, the unexpected emotional shift struck. Ibrahim's voice cracked slightly as he described a child's first lost tooth, abandoned without anyone to care. The audience collectively gasped. He paused, letting the weight of reality sink in. The vulnerability made him more human, more relatable. When he continued, his voice steadied, firm again. Each word seemed to tether the crowd closer, binding them emotionally to the truth he carried. Fear, hope, sadness, all were mixed in a tense symphony that gripped the room. Trump's team launched another surprise attack. Messages on social media were spreading false claims about Ibrahim's intentions. Screens in the room lit up with notifications. The tension spiked instantly. Some in the audience whispered doubts. Ibrahim didn't look away. Instead, he walked closer to the edge of the stage, speaking softly but powerfully. Truth doesn't need defense, it needs courage. His calm defiance made hearts pound, and a strange energy took hold. Then the twist. A former critic in the front row stood up. She had been openly skeptical before, even vocal. But now, tears streaming down her face, she nodded at Ibrahim. "You speak what we feel," she said. The crowd held their breath. An adversary had turned into an ally, shifting the emotional tide entirely. Ibrahim seized the moment, telling another story, this time of an ordinary man who refused to give up despite overwhelming obstacles. Each detail painted a picture so vivid, you could hear the creaking of worn shoes, feel the ache of tired muscles. By the end, the audience wasn't just watching, they were invested. Every cheer, gasp, and silence carried emotional weight. The real question lingered. Would Trump respond? Or was Ibrahim's calm strength already too powerful to challenge? Rain began tapping against the windows, soft but persistent. The sound made the room feel intimate, almost protective. Ibrahim's gaze swept across the audience, connecting individually, not just collectively. He recounted a story of courage under betrayal. A young soldier abandoned by allies yet standing tall, refusing to surrender. The narrative was sharp, emotional, and tangible. Every cough, every rustle of clothing, every nervous glance felt alive. Then, the unexpected twist struck again. A sudden blackout plunged the room into darkness. The murmurs and shuffles of fear rose immediately. But Ibrahim's calm voice broke through. Even in darkness, light persists. Courage persists. A small beam from the exit illuminated his face. The crowd gasped at the stark imagery, the leader standing alone in near total darkness, yet unshakable. Emotion surged. Awe, fear, hope, all at once. By the time the lights returned, the audience was fully with him. Not just listening, but emotionally tethered. The stage was no longer just a platform. It was a battleground of hearts. Outside, lightning split the sky, a mirror to the storm of tension yet to come. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Ibrahim stepped forward, the crowd leaning in with every heartbeat. Each person felt the electricity, not just from the storm outside, but from the intensity building inside. He began recounting a story of resilience, an elderly woman who, despite losing everything in floods, rebuilt her life brick by brick. The imagery was visceral, the smell of mud, the sting of cold water, the sound of splintering wood. The audience was drawn into every detail, some wiping away tears, others gripping their seats. Then came the twist. A sudden heckle rang out from a corner of the room. A man, angry and loud, questioned Ibrahim's motives, attempting to sow doubt. Gasps filled the air. The crowd tensed. Ibrahim didn't flinch. Instead, he walked calmly toward the man, voice steady. Doubt is natural, but fear of truth is a choice. The room went silent. Slowly, the man's expression softened. A tense energy flipped into reluctant respect. The emotional shift was immediate, yet believable. By the end of the chapter, the audience wasn't just watching a speech. They were part of it, emotionally invested, and leaning toward Ibrahim. And outside, the storm grew louder, hinting that bigger trials awaited. Lightning flashed, illuminating the crowd's faces in stark relief. Every eye was on Ibrahim, every breath synchronized with his rhythm. The suspense was palpable, almost suffocating. He told a story of a young teacher working in a forgotten village who continued to inspire children despite overwhelming obstacles. Every detail, the chalk dust in the air, the squeak of worn shoes, the trembling of small hands, made the moment alive and raw. Suddenly a phone rang, cutting sharply through the tension. The audience flinched, but Ibrahim smiled faintly, calm as ever. "Even interruptions can teach us focus," he said. His unexpected humor broke the tension for a brief, humanizing second. Then the emotional twist hit. A young man in the crowd, previously skeptical, began crying silently. Ibrahim paused, walking toward him. "Your heart knows truth," he said softly. The audience held its breath, watching him humanize every struggle. By the end, the energy was electric. Loyalty had shifted completely. Doubt was fading, replaced by awe, empathy, and admiration. Outside, the rain battered the windows harder, mirroring the intensity building toward confrontation. Ibrahim's voice grew firm, resonating across the hall. He described a world where people acted not out of fear, but from courage. His words were simple, yet piercing, each one striking hearts like lightning. Then came the unexpected tension spike. Security whispered urgently. Trump's representatives were sending a live warning message, threatening to pull the event. The audience froze. The room's collective heartbeat seemed to skip. Ibrahim didn't falter. Instead, he raised his hand, eyes steady. "Threats cannot silence truth," he declared. The simplicity of his courage electrified the audience. Fear flipped into admiration. Uncertainty became belief. Suddenly, someone in the front row gasped, pointing toward the back. A reporter had captured a moment of quiet defiance from Ibrahim and was broadcasting it live. Millions could now see his unwavering stance. The stakes had risen. And yet, Ibrahim's calmness never wavered. The room had transformed. Hesitation had disappeared, replaced by an unspoken understanding. They were witnessing not just a speech, but a turning point. And somewhere beyond the walls, the storm outside mirrored the turbulence and power inside. A perfect metaphor for what was coming next. The room was tense, every heartbeat loud, every eye glued to Ibrahim. Outside, lightning flashed again, cutting across the sky like a warning. The storm mirrored the rising intensity inside. Ibrahim began his final segment with a quiet story. One of a young soldier who refused to surrender even when betrayed by allies. His voice trembled slightly with emotion, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. The audience leaned in, some biting lips, some wiping tears. Suddenly, a shout erupted from the back. Trump's representative had entered the hall, trying to intimidate the crowd. The tension spiked, hearts pounding, but Ibrahim didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his hand calmly, his gaze piercing. Courage is not absence of fear. It is standing when fear surrounds you. The words landed like a shockwave. The room went silent, then erupted in applause, not just polite, but fierce, emotional, unstoppable. Even some who had doubted him before felt their hearts shift. The tide was turning. Trump's absence now felt like weakness, and Ibrahim's courage felt unstoppable. By the end of the chapter, the audience was fully with him, emotionally tethered. And outside, the storm raged on, echoing the conflict and triumph within the hall. Ibrahim stepped to the center of the stage, the spotlight catching the determination in his eyes. "This moment is bigger than any one person," he said. "It is about truth, courage, and hope." A sudden, unexpected twist struck. A young child in the audience, clutching a notebook, shouted, "We believe you!" The words pierced the tension like sunlight through clouds. Gasps and murmurs spread across the crowd. Their emotion was raw, real, human. Ibrahim smiled, kneeling slightly to meet the child's gaze. "Thank you," he whispered. "That is why we stand, so that hope never dies." The collective emotion in the room surged. Tears ran freely. Adults and children alike were crying, moved to the core. Then, the door at the back slowly opened again. People held their breath. But instead of chaos, a group of former skeptics walked forward, joining the audience's support. The room was transformed, unified, electrified by trust, truth, and courage. The storm outside began to ease, light breaking through dark clouds. Inside, the emotional storm had peaked, leaving everyone forever changed. The final moments arrived. Ibrahim raised his hands, not in triumph, but in quiet strength. "We have faced doubt, fear, and challenges tonight," he said. "But together we stand stronger than ever." The audience erupted, cheers and tears blending into one unstoppable wave. Even those who had doubted him felt pride, hope, and inspiration. Every story, every pause, every word had led to this emotional crescendo. Then the twist that no one expected. A subtle notification sound echoed from someone's phone. A live social media feed confirmed millions of people across the world had witnessed the courage, empathy, and leadership on display tonight. The stakes were now global. Ibrahim stepped back, letting the crowd's emotion fill the space. Trump's shadow was gone, not with confrontation, but with truth and courage. The audience's loyalty had shifted completely. He had turned fear into hope, anger into admiration. As the applause continued, the camera panned across tear-streaked faces, smiles, and awe. The story ended, but the impact would last. If this story moved you, hit like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe for more stories that touch your heart. Your support keeps courage and hope alive.